Battalions of clergy today bustled around Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to consolidate his position as president. The protests, which filled some of the streets, have died down as opponents who claim that he stole the election come to terms with the power of the state. Maybe the status quo will reassert itself, but the protests have shown how news has changed. Professional journalists have been restrained, restricted, and some thrown out of the country. In their place, amateurs have told their own unmediated and often graphic story to the world.
The people who have been taking part in these demonstrations have been using increasingly mobile phones.
Twitter posting their messages in 140 characters or less. They're getting around the restrictions of Iran's state-controlled media.
Social networking sites like Twitter to get their views out to the rest of the world.
So-called news aggregating websites like the Huffington Post, with bloggers in direct contact with Iran, were the first to publish eyewitness accounts. The established network soon caught on.
Then, all of a sudden, some 500 people with clubs and wood, they came out of Hedayat Mosque and they poured into the streets and they started beating everyone.
A sign of the times, the president, recognising the new order, ignores conventional media to take a question from Iran via a blogger.
Since we're on Iran, I know Nico Pitney is here from Huffington Post.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nico, I know that you and all across the internet, we've been seeing a lot of reports coming directly out of Iran. I know that there may actually be questions from people in Iran who are communicating through the internet. Do you have a question?
That broke with precedent and caused an almighty stink in the White House press corps. So, if bloggers are now holding the president to account, has internet journalism come of age? And could the citizen journalist with a camera phone replace reporters in the near future? Well, with us now is Arianna Huffington of the Huffington Post and Anne McElvoy of the Evening Standard. You accept, Arianna Huffington, it's a partial picture that you've been publishing?
Well, it's as complete a picture as anybody was publishing, given that the mullahs tried to control information, refused to renew journalists' visas,
so
and to
you're
allow them to
accepting it's
take
a partial
pictures.
picture?
Well, any journalism is a partial picture, but it is the most complete picture.
But do you make any attempt to verify what you're sent before you publish it?
Well, first of all, there is something on the internet when it's done well, and this is not to replace professional journalism, but to fill the vacuum that was left when there were no professional journalists allowed to do the work.
What's the answer to the question? Do you verify stuff before you publish it?
A lot of them were verified before they were posted, absolutely. That's why we had an editor, Nico Pitney, who was curating what was appearing on the site.
Curating is not quite the same as verifying, is it?
Well, not everything was verifiable, but it was also immediately corrected by others if something appeared that was not correct.
That is an absolutely fair point, isn't it, Anne McElvoy?
Well, I think that cusp of what's curating as opposed to editing is actually quite an important one here. I think that the internet's extremely valuable, and it is made in the cases like Iran. It really has made a difference in that you can see these images immediately. When I think back when I was covering the fall of the wall in 1989, the revolutions of Eastern Europe, it took ages to get very basic information, like how many people in how many cities. Now, where I have some doubts is when it is intensely subjective, what you're seeing and doing. And I think it is even more so than most other journalism. It's a mosaic. It's a very valuable mosaic, but each little piece in itself doesn't give you a sense of the full picture or the depth or the comparison of what is really going on, and it does need to be complemented by other forms of journalism.
Well, absolutely. I think this either-or way of looking at it is really obsolete. I mean, nobody's talking about replacing professional journalism, but supplementing.
Some people are.
Actually, yeah.
No, I think we are talking about supplementing professional journalism with thousands of citizen journalists all around the world. I mean, what happened in Iran was a defining moment for new media, because you had the State Department asking Twitter to postpone doing the necessary work. They had to do the maintenance work because it was the only source of information in many instances.
You were clearly used. We saw it there in the example of the press conference in the White House. There was something going on that is different to the relationship between the mainstream old-fashioned media, if you want to call them that, and political power.
Oh, absolutely not. That is absurd that we were used. The president wanted to get a question from Iran. He did not know what the question was. The question was actually the toughest question he was asked that day. The question was, if Ahmadinejad actually remains in power, are you going to impose any conditions on his regime before you negotiate with him? This was not a softball question.
Do you have an anxiety about whether a line is crossed?
Yeah, I think a line can quite easily be crossed. I mean, where I think that there are some doubts, I think in Iran everybody is pretty clear on what happened and who are the good guys, and in my view should have been much earlier supported by President Obama and by the British government. I think where there is more ambiguity in a story about protesters versus the government or what is really going on, well, if you can get this emotive material out into the public domain first and get it drawn to people's attention, all politicians want to be net savvy, so they take questions from people like HuffPost and the cutting edge of the internet. I can see ambiguities there that would perhaps look less benign than this particular case
This material has an authenticity and a life that does not exist even with the work of the very, very finest journalists. It has an unmediated, raw quality. No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm actually supporting your side of this point.
It's actually at the thing that we need to keep remembering is that it was the only way to actually circumvent what the regime was trying to do, which was to control all information, to not allow any news to come out from Iran.
But by and large, we were only hearing one side of the story.
This was a moment to be celebrated. You could see both sides. You could see actually the brutal violence taken by camera phones.
But you don't accept that some cases might be more ambiguous and that the first image tends to carry the day, as we know in news, whatever the medium, and that you don't have any worries about that precisely because of the unmediated and very instant nature of the business.
But it's not unmediated. You know, Nico Pitney, who was in charge of our coverage.
But how can you possibly know?
No, but it was not unmediated. I mean, he was actually going through thousands of tweets to decide what to post.
One man was going through thousands of tweets.
Well, not alone, with his team. He was going through hundreds of videos. He wasn't posting everything because otherwise there would be no value added in what he was doing. And he was including a lot of wires, a lot of professional journalism, in as much as any of it could be gotten out of Iran.
But this has changed now. The world has changed, hasn't it?
Absolutely has. I mean, I'm sorry to go back to 1989, but I think it's quite instructive that where you had basically a poster revolution and things, you know, as fast as you could get information around was word of mouth and posters. Now, just think of the difference. I remember running around actually the height of the collapse of the Communist Party, trying to find out if a local communist boss had killed himself or not. Now, it took me about a day, and now I can't be on HuffPost within about 5 minutes. But it is this question of verifiability that I still dwell on, and it's why I think that the traditional press will be there for a while.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Now, coming up on